Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Alienware Analyst Desk. Of course, it is day 3 of the Smite World Championship, powered by Curse Voice. I'm Golden Boy, joined by Drybird, also joining us as well as the amazing and oh-so lovable Zimstar, and Allied, Zimstar from Trig Esports, Allied from Complexity. How you guys doing, folks?
Doing good, man.
Chilling, okay. Get a little stretch off there, of course. It has been a very long weekend of incredible Smite action here in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Cobb Energy Center. It's been great, Tribert, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. And we have a lot of action still yet to go. I mean, we've seen so many great matchups between so many strong teams, but let's look at what's been happening so far and where we are in the tournament. The upper bracket and the entire placement stage is done. The knockout stage is also done. You have your two grand final placement teams, Titan and Cognitive Prime. And the consolation match will be the start of the day today. It's going to be SK Gaming up against Cognitive Red. Now, one thing to note about this, Golden Boy, if you look at the top side of this is actually a double rematch between these teams. Cognitive Prime faced off against Titan in the beginning of day 1, and again, SK Gaming eliminated Cognitive Red and went forward into the semifinals. This is a full rematch for both these teams. There's a lot of heavy blood here.
Oh, it's just pretty good, a good story, I would have to say. There you could see Cog Red, right, with that victory on SK Gaming was huge.
Oh, yeah.
You know, or SK Gaming getting that victory over them was absolutely huge. Changed the tempo of the entire tournament. But then, yeah, the story of Cog Prime, they looked incredible. They were constantly kicking butt. And it showed in the finals when they were able to come, or I should say in the match before the finals, but a matchup that could have been the finals, honestly, with how good it was. That was just one of the finest displays of just competitive gaming I'd seen in my career. And it was an absolute joy to watch back here. So we have two, like you said, amazing rematches that are going to take place today. First up is the consolation match. That's going to be the one coming up first, which will be Cognitive Red and SK Gaming. Cognitive Red, man, had a heartbreak loss. You know, I heard like Divios and the crew, they were really bummed out about it. But here's the thing, in Allied, I want your take on this. You know, they're young guys, right? I mean, what is it? Divios is 15, I believe.
Young boy.
Yeah, right? So this young man's going to have so many more opportunities in his career to be able to make even more money. I mean, and that's scary for you as a player. I would only have to imagine. But, you know, Cog Red, I mean, just about their performance yesterday, about Prime's performance as well, how do you feel going into today?
Honestly, I just hope Cognitive Red has the morale. Hopefully they're not like too sad and they can go into their consolation match fresh, prepared, because it's still pretty serious with the consolation match. You don't want to, you know, by any means just like lose that just because you're feeling off your game. But yeah, I think both Cognitive Primes, Cognitives are going to be okay.
Well, let's go ahead and take a look at what Cognitive Red is and who's on that team. And this is just a team of pure, raw, unadulterated talent. That's what it is. I mean, they are so good at this game, and it's hard to really understand why. I mean, it just comes from the heart. You see Divios on the left side, the solo laner next to him, the jungle Gars, the mid laner Boosh, Eonic next to him on support, and Snoopy there, the hunter player. And it's been a very long weekend. Day 1, they faced off against the Chinese teams, ended up getting a very strong matchup there, losing in the placement stage, going to the quarterfinals and making it all the way here to the consolation. Now, one thing to mention before we get into too heavy nitty-gritty of the consolation, this is a separation of $130,000. You're talking about a big difference between 3rd and 4th. So, you know, by no means is this a small feat for these teams, and they want that 3rd place so very bad. It's going to be a best of 3 matchup, whereas the grand finals will be best of 5. So they have possibly 2 chances. I mean, we've seen only 1 set go to 3 games so far, and that was the Cog Prime versus Cog Red.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny you mentioned that gap, right? I was actually talking to Gandhi about this. You know, it's funny to think that this split, right? Like, you know, take Divios' age, for example, he's 15 years old, right? Normal kid his age is looking to get a job, right? Maybe at like a fast food joint, maybe a retail store, right? You know, it's something like that. That's usually what the salary would look like, of course, depending on where you are, right? I mean, granted, when I was his age, I wasn't making 25 grand a year, substantially less. But I would say that, you know, nowadays that's kind of scaling up to that. And, you know, it's funny to think that just that alone, just that split alone is substantial. But you're not even like counting all the other money, right?
Right.
All the dollar bills.
That's just the difference.
You know, yeah, it's just make it rain.
Just throwing it out.
gonna
And
be.
you know, he's working at the convenience store solo lane. I mean, he's there and he's working hard. And you know,
What a good.
you look at it.
I'm impressed.
You look
man.
at these players, and they have so much more to go. We talk
Yeah.
about different genres of games, and when they hit their peak, and the biggest thing is, you know, game like Smite, it's very much a mental game. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys. You guys know that already. We've seen it on stage. In fact, I think the #1 item that we could talk about as far as teams that are succeeding and teams that aren't, it's versatility. The ability to change the way you play on the fly based on what you see is what a MOBA is. And you look at Titan, for example. We talked about it yesterday. We talked to Ataraxia. You know, what was the score in scrims? Oh, he's like, we lost, you know, we won 3 times. How many times did SK beat you? 16. It's like you practiced all week long, went 16-3 against this team, barely won a single match, and then you come and 2-0 them on stage. You know what it was? They just came up and they changed their whole playstyle, and SK was not ready to adjust on the fly the way Titan did, and you have to be able to see the stats in front of you and make a good in-context call.
Speaking of SK, let's actually bring up their player profiles. They're going to be fighting for their spot in the Constellations as well, or their team profile, I should say. Zimstar, let's bring you in on this. You know, there you can see all the boys in SK. Maniac was a big point of discussion, you know, his ability, but also Zyros too. That
Yeah.
was the big question. The jungle, he picked Kali twice, ended up burning them in the butt, unfortunately. What are your thoughts about this SK squad going into this Constellation match?
Like Drybear said, you have to be able to adapt to situations. I mean, I think the second game, picking Kali was not the right choice. I mean, they should have realized right away, like, okay, Titan is not going for the early game aggression. We need to adapt and, you know, meet that, because I don't know, the Kali just wasn't rolling. I just didn't feel it. I don't think they should have been that scared. I mean, Prime that with the Kali just fine. So I think they just needed to pick something else in the jungle.
But now, the question I have for you, though, is one thing I noticed about COG Red, and again, very limited experience on my end with these teams, is, you know, COG Red mechanically is an incredible team. Like, they just get the job done as far as their ability is concerned. Do you feel that SK can match them blow for blow with the, you know, in the mechanics department?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think SK is probably they have probably like some of the best mechanical players in Europe, at least, and like they're all masters in joust and stuff. You know, I think 1-on-1, if you look against Titan, I think if you like to joust each other, they would probably win the lanes. But it doesn't matter. It's a team game. It all comes down to you know grouping up, playing the team fights out right, and just taking on the Titan. When it comes to Red, I think SK is on the same skill level. So it's just going to come down to who can recover the most when it blows yesterday, and who can just, you know, who just wants it the most.
Yeah, you're talking about one-on-one. That's actually a great way to talk about these matchups here.
Yeah.
5 roles, 5 players on each team, and 5 different matchups. We don't give enough love to support. Let's talk about support. You got Young Badger there on SK Gaming up against Eonic, the champion himself. Very similar playstyles, but you can see Geb obviously highly prioritized for both these. We saw, strangely enough, a little bit of Athena play coming out from Eonic yesterday, which worked very well for him. Over to you, Allied, because, you know, as a Hunter player, you're very up close and personal with support. Can be a lifeline for you, especially in the early stages of the game. I mean, what do you take away from this matchup, Badger versus Eonic?
Going into the Constellation match, honestly, I think the biggest question is what's going on with Ymir. Like, when is Ymir going to be picked up? If you notice, I think all of Europe picked Ymir over Geb, over Athena. Ymir is a very high-value pick, and in North America, Ymir is kind of like, what? Like, why'd you pick that? You know? So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they deal with that. And also, what's really notable about this, like, little head-on-head, Eonic plays Sobek. Sobek was the old-school 2012 counter to Ymir, like, outright, which is why, like, I think this is going to be an excellent matchup going, like, just to watch it out, because they might just pick Sobek into it. I wouldn't be surprised.
Zim, real quick, I mean, we've seen a heavy prioritization towards Sylvanas, which when he came out, everyone thought he was going to be the greatest, and then, you know, first tournament play coming out of his release, most teams weren't picking him up. They didn't really say, you know, it wasn't good enough, and we're seeing Sylvanas bans, we're seeing Sylvanas picks, and even, you know, yesterday Jeff Hinla went off with the character. You know, why are people now focusing on Amir's, Ares's, and even Sylvanas's as well?
During the qualifier, Young Badgie farmed Trickstank with his Amir walls. The Trickstank was playing with Sylvanas, and like, if you have no escape and you get walled off, and your entire team is behind the wall, I mean, you're just gonna kill you. They're just gonna keep killing you all over again. But if Ymir falls behind early, I mean, maybe against like a Sobek or something, then he would just get farmed instead. So it's kind of like, you know, hit or miss kind of thing. You know, either you get rolling or you don't. And I think NA might look to ban out Ymir because I think they underestimated just the power.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next thing we can talk about, of course, you know, another pillar in the early meta of Smite is going to be the mid laner and how much they can control the mid camps, whether or not they can rotate from lane to lane and apply pressure in the right areas, but also the lineup that is under the most fire generally. You get a lot of pressure in the mid lane, a lot of rotations from jungle, even solo can make an appearance, and you have this big responsibility to get these mid camps as often as possible. We see Captain Twig and the Boosh on screen here, you know, Ra, Kukulkan, and Agni, which is very strange, right, because he has not played a single one of these top played gods this entire tournament. He's been, you know, changing it up. We've seen a ton of Poseidon. You know, back to you, Zim. What do you think Boosh is best at, and who should he play today?
I don't know. Twig's Agni is really scary, but I think Bush would be fine if you just play like a Ra or something like that. I don't know. Twig is like the quiet, you know, hero of SK Gaming. He always does well, always performs. He's very, very good mechanically, very hard to gank. They might just, I don't even know if, does Bush play Agni? So maybe even just pick the Agni and just deny Twig because it's very hard to gank an Agni and you don't want Twig to get farmed.
Yeah.
I honestly think with that matchup in middle lane, it's going to be really tough. However, the Boosh Guards combo is something you really got to take out of it because in mid lane, in the current meta, it's not so much a 1v1 anymore, it's a dual lane. It's another dual lane. Junglers chilling in mid the whole time until mid Harpies are respawning, getting mid red buff, just rotating a lot, and they do it together. They have a lot of synergy. So I think going into that, I think the Boosh Guards like combo is gonna be really scary, and I'm really excited to see, which is probably why you see a lot of Poseidon and Kronos, because they have the utility to set up for a lot of kills for guards, and that's probably preferences for the team, with the cripple on Poseidon's Whirlpool and the Kronos' stun, as you saw with that one game where Kronos got stun level 1. And
Yeah. Of course, there's, you know, when you talk about, you know, support and, you know, how that plays out mid, like we, you know, just spoke about, gotta talk about the Hunter role, right? And in this particular matchup, it will be Snoopy versus Reels. And really looking forward to this, just because Reels played so great yesterday. I felt like there was a lot of good, like a lot of quality play out of him. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Reels, you know, I think that the weird part about yesterday's semifinals at SK Gaming, it was just complete and utter overconfidence. I mean, they came into that saying, we can pick whatever we want, we can play whatever we want, and we can go wherever we want. It's going to work out. I watched Reels run in 4v1 against Titan, get a kill on the support, which is never a valuable trade, Hunter for support, and then just died. And he did that several times during the game. I mean, there was one time, Zimstar, it was near the end of the game, the Phoenix was under pressure, and Reels just dove past 3 people to try and box either Hunter, but then his escape was so limited because he was so far forward. What is Reels thinking?
Reels is used to being ahead. I think he got frustrated by the fact that, you know, they stole his blue buff early game. He was level 3 when Atrex was level 5. And, you know, when you go into this and this like only one other EU hunter here, you want to show off that you're the best, you know? So when you fall behind early, and I think he just wanted to try to fight to like prove that he's the best. But he was never really there in gold and XP. Like he just couldn't really fight, you know? And I don't think he realized that.
Well, Al, I want to pose this one to you. You know, talk about Snoopy here, though, right? Absolutely talented player. What are your thoughts about Snoopy in this Reels matchup, Snoopy versus Reels matchup?
honestly, I think Snoopy overall, I think he is the better player on decision-making wise. I think, as you can see, like Snoopy knows where to be. His positioning is on point. Mechanically, I think Snoopy's up there. However, I would give like that area to Reels. I've seen Reels definitely take a lot of good 1v1 fights, but overall, I think Snoopy is the stronger hunter coming into this with a more widened god pool, and he's really flexible.
You talk about players that are comfortable being ahead. Reels and Snoopy both in that same boat. I mean, we talked about this in North American Regional Championship.
Yeah.
Snoopy, as far as the statistics go, was actually, you know, incredible if he's even overhead, and one of the worst hunters if he's behind as far as percentage-wise. I mean, you dominated him in that role when we're looking at the statistics going into the Regional Championship, Allied. I mean, as far as being able to recover from a poor game. Snoopy didn't have it there. And same thing goes for SK. We saw, you know, even in the solo lane in the jungle, it was difficult for that. But, you know, just because you're such a big fan of Hercules, I think it's a good time to talk about the solo lane, Golden Boy. We got Maniac up against Divios here, and this is the matchup that I think a lot of people are hyped about, right? Because normally we don't see the solo lane take off in the beginning, and Divios just drives it. Yesterday, he was attacking Omega near his tier 2 tower in the first 3 minutes of the game, and Maniac, I think, is very comfortable with that amount of pressure coming towards him early. To you, Zimstar, you're a big fan of Maniac and the way he plays. Do you think he can stop the Divios train?
You know what I want to see? I want to see Divios go Herc, and then I try to counter it with Chang'e, just to see how that will work out. Because if you put like a really heavy physical jungler in the jungle, like the Thor, for example, if that goes through, I have a Chang'e in solo lane. It's going to be really hard to build against both of these and just keep ganking the Hercules. And with the Divine Ruin on Chang'e, Herc heal is basically useless. So that's what I want to see. I mean, he's one of the few that actually plays the Chang'e competitively, so it could happen.
Also has that anti-healing mechanic, which can help with the mitigate wounds. And as we know, mitigate wounds, it takes in, it's a 4-second period where it'll remember the damage you took and then heal that percentage of that damage back over time, which at low levels is not that much, but at the highest rank of mitigate wounds, it'll actually heal more than you took, which was what gives Hercules that major strength. So, you know, he's definitely a driving force. And, you know, the solo lane is pretty removed from the duo lane Allied as far as how, I mean, it's across the maps. You don't really see it all that much. How much do you think the solo lane brings to the early and mid game?
I think solo lane is absolutely important, depending on how good you are, how well you're doing in the lane, and what you're actually bringing to your team composition. Solo lane's generally made for farming the lane as hard as you can, key rotations for objectives, and pressure overall. You get really good map pressure in Fire Giant, tier 2 tower. Like, if you can get really good pressure over there, it frees up your team elsewhere. And I think that's the key going into solo lane, which is why I also don't like to see a lot of like non-tanky or maybe even like non-tanky mages, non-tanky bruisers, just because you need to be like resilient. You need to be able to handle.
Stay alive.
Yes, you need to sustain, stay alive, and you need to. It depends on also what you're bringing to your team comp, which is also going into the Maniac Divios matchup. I'm really curious to see if Maniac will either counterpick Divios or just outright match him, because like I said also, if Maniac chooses to counterpick, we could see the same problem when it was SK versus
Titan.
Yes, SK versus Titan,
I got you,
where
bro.
they had an unbalanced team comp of too many assassins versus a really nasty front line. And I just really hope he's able to complement. I hope his team's able to complement the fact that he might pick an assassin versus Devious or a mage, because that's really important when building the correct team comp to beat a team.
One thing I'm excited about seeing in this solo lane matchup is yesterday we saw Divios. You know, he was flirting with death a lot. He was 4v1, and his team was like, "Why are you still going in?" And you know, up against Cog Prime, I think Cog Prime is a little bit more cautious than SK. We've seen SK. I mean, they're hot-blooded. If they see a fight, they're going to take it. And I'm concerned that, you know, if Divios keeps that overconfidence that SK has, it feels to me like this is going to be a little bit of a brittle matchup in the way that both these teams, they want to fight constantly. And when you have that kind of heavy clashing, it can lead to poor early games for one team and a crazy short match.
Yeah.
I think if SK picks a outright, like, just balanced team comp with a good early, mid, and late game, I think SK can compete. Especially, they were making too many plays. You could tell they're really frustrated going against Titan. Zero's really dropped the ball, which is unfortunate because I think he's one of the top junglers coming out of Europe. If they could fix their team composition problems going into the next match, I would hope to see just an amazing game coming out of both teams.
Yeah, and speaking of Zeros, by the way, let's actually bring up the next player comparison here. And these are two players that, you know, made a big statement. We had the Gars over there, or Thugars on the other side, with that Thor, you know, Thor Gars, you know, as most people know him, and then Zeros as well, who unfortunately for him was put into a role yesterday that you could tell just wasn't working with the Kali pick, and that is just an unfortunate circumstance for them. But these two guys coming into it, and also with the Gars, another thing to note is, you know, in that Prime matchup, you know, that Thorgars was neutralized. Like, they stopped him completely. No room to breathe, put a lot of pressure on him. That was one of the key to victories there for Prime. I mean, don't get me wrong, Prime did a lot of things right, but shutting down Thorgars. It's like, is his name Thorgars or is it Thorgars? Shutting down Garzo was a big thing. Allied, your point.
I agree 100%. I think as much as MLC Stealth did absolutely destroy the game, the true MVP, like, just because I think jungle is the most important role in the game on terms of carrying, setting up your team for success, setting up your lanes to actually win. But the true, like, key was Anister shutting down Thorgars. We saw a couple 1v1s. We saw a couple of team fights where he just focused him out, which is also why I was confused during the draft, because you could tell these teams like valued Circuit differently, and they rather have Thor versus it. But I don't know. It seemed like each team dealt with Thor or Circuit differently. It was really interesting to see for the first time like what they value on Circuit and like when they would actually pick it. And it was definitely a good learning experience. But I think that was definitely a big, huge key to beating COG in Game 3.
I think it's going to come down to the junglers here. I think most lanes in this matchup are pretty evenly matched. So it's just going to come down to Zyros and Dagars, you know, whoever has the best rotations and whoever has the best timings for ganks. Because Zyros yesterday, the games they won, he was doing phenomenal, you know, the Kwang play and stuff. I expect Kwang to get banned against SK today. But the Kali games
it's like he discovered something and that no one was really messing around with.
Exactly.
Now this is like, okay, we just got to prevent.
But I'm just concerned, you know, if he just needs to step up the game from the Kali games yesterday. I mean, first game, you know, a few mistakes here and there, but picking it again second game, I think was a really bad call.
Now, you mentioned at the beginning of this that it was rather unfortunate that he had the Kali pick in the way that it was working, but I think that's fair to say for the first game. I would not say that's fair to say for the second game. That was, you know, he put himself in that position by choosing that Kali the second time around.
That's true.
It's very strange. I mean, the Kali was not on that top god list we saw earlier. We actually, I don't think I've ever seen him play Kali unless it was like a ranked match, so it's very strange.
I think, I mean, this is just speculation, of course. You can never be, you know, hear what they're saying, but it might be like, you know, I am a good Kali, let me redeem myself or something like that. I don't know, it just might have felt like he had a bad start, But you know, it's not really the place to do when you're playing for over, you know, a game worth $1 million. It's not the best venue to do that at.
I think it was just overall he wanted to make sure that he brought like what he needed to the team, and he felt like, I don't want Repicos to get it. Maybe he couldn't deal with it. Maybe he didn't have an answer for it, so the best answer was just, I'm just going to play Kali. That's it, just hand me Kali.
Just like own it up and just say,
yeah, just going to own up. All right, first game happened, boys. I'm sorry, you know, and that's it. Let's go into game 2 fresh and let's go. But however, I also believe it wasn't Zeros's absolute fault, especially in game 2, even though his Kali was very lackluster. I think it was also drafting problems, team composition, and priorities. Those are key points to cover as well. So that way, Zeros doesn't get all the blame, because I think he's a phenomenal player. I think just given different team circumstances and team decision making during drafts, would have worked out a lot better for him.
Something really interesting, I was watching the VODs yesterday, and something we actually didn't pick up on was that Prime did something extremely smart yesterday. Pretty Prime, that is the mid laner for Titan. He put on his Vulcan turret at the speed buff before the lane phase started to help them to take the speed buff, because then they know SK was going to try and invade that, right? So he put on a turret, they got the speed down before SK got there. So they're going to go there, and then they double hog the blue buff. So they secured their own buffs, so SK just had no buffs, and they fell behind really hard early game. I've never seen anyone do that. I mean, putting a turret there was genius, and I think it just caught them off guard, and they're like, okay, so what do we do now? And they had no real plan.
That seems to be working a lot in this tournament. People doing new things that they've practiced before, but obviously just changes the whole thought process. I think it's very easy to fall in this rut. And we talk about how COG Prime was able to shut down Thorgars yesterday, and I think that's pretty easy to say if you're a team that's been screaming the sister team constantly for the last 4 or 5 months. But when you look at SK Gaming, they don't have really that much experience against Cognitive Red. In fact, a fun note about this is Gars has not lost with Thor since the disqualification in the regional championships. In fact, he almost never loses when he picks up Thor. You always have to ban. We talked about yesterday, right? The hammer's right here. Don't let him have it. And for a team like SK, I think they have a lot to worry about going as COG Red. SK definitely has a lot of aggression early, and COG Red, sometimes they deal with it well, sometimes they don't. So I'm very curious to see what they can pick up against SK Gaming that'll really work for them. It seems like I don't think you can ban Divios, right? I mean, Hercules, it makes sense. I think the Soul Lane's always going to get fed, but he's got such a huge god pool. You know, and if you're spending valuable ban real estate on things like Fenrir or Tyr or Giannis for the solo lane, you're leaving things wide open like Circuit, Thor, even Nemesis, which seems to work really well for them.
Yeah, we saw, you know, also how Nemesis worked out. I'm trying to remember what game it was. I'm blanking right now.
Nan.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Nan killed it.
Yeah, there was that one. I mean, you know, one thing I will say, though, in the first matchup that SK had with Cog Red, you could certainly see a certain amount of confidence. It was also, if I'm correct, a best of one. So, you know, this time around, though, I can see SK taking potentially that first game, but I can see Cog Red just pulling through with 2 wins. I wouldn't be surprised just because, like, they'll just adapt quicker. Like, they're getting that second stab at SK. You know for a fact, like, they looked at, like, what they did wrong to make sure that they can improve it moving forward.
I think Titan is just SK's kryptonite. I think SK will win this game. I think SK probably would have beat Prime too if they had a chance against them. I feel like, you know, Titan is just SK's kryptonite. They just can't win against them in a tournament setting.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the Nemesis play, and you're bringing it back to the best of 3 SK Gaming versus We Love Bacon. Nan picked up Nemesis, and you know, it seemed like all game long, even with the winged blade and with limited damage, the amount of utility that brought to the table was just off the charts. And I think that, you know, the jungle is going to be a big portion for SK Gaming if they shut down Gars in some way. And the other thing I do want to mention as well, it seemed like Ionic was having a lot of trouble in that best of 3 towards the end as far as keeping his momentum going, keeping his morale high, and be able to react. And the one thing we know about Ionic is he is by far one of the best supports if he's ahead. I mean, he goes, and the reason he has one of the highest KDAs of all supports is because he very rarely dies. You compare that to Badger. Badger actually has one of the highest death ratios of all supports because he's very hyper aggressive, but he generally doesn't escape the fight. He's all in until he dies, whereas Ionic, he sets up the fights, he stays alive, and he's a perfect tank if he gets that gold gain early.
Which is why I'm also curious, because as you saw with the SK versus Titan game yesterday, both supports died a lot. They just kept dying. It's like they love dying. But honestly, it was just, that was like the biggest thing I saw in each team fight. Each team focused the support in the team fight, and they would get their stuff off and die. But also the positioning was very greedy. Like Young Badgie would run in suicide for a ward, but he would also set up a play behind it. And it seems like his team is so used to it, like synergy-wise, not that it's a bad thing, but so used to it synergy-wise that they would be able to follow up on his play, and for every death that Badgie would get, it would be 2 kills for their team. So I'm actually really curious, because in NA, Jeff Hindla and Ionic, they generally don't die that much.
I think it's a European thing.
Yeah, it seems to be like a European thing, because a lot of the supports, like, they're willing, and I like that because I think that's cool. They're down to throw
Coming
their life
from a 100
away.
player, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're down to throw their life away. However, I think most NA supports pride their lives, and I know for a fact from talking to Incontinentia, my support for my team, if he could not die, he will not die. Like, for example, he will not give up his life to save me and Lane. You can ask him that right now. Like, if there's an opportunity for him to get away, he will. Because he's like, as long as I'm staying ahead, I can keep providing utility to my team. So, good luck, Allied. Oh.
Seems like a personal problem between you two, and you need some therapy to figure that out.
I'm used to it. I sit on the tower.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Let's put our money where our mouth is, real quick, guys. I mean, and obviously this is a best of 3.
That's
so,
right.
you know, Golden Boy, I mean, tell me, what do you think? Is this going to be a 2-0, a 2-1?
Listen, man, I've been spitting hot fire with my picks all week.
Okay,
long.
all right.
You know what I mean? And
This was
again,
originally a black jacket,
yeah,
and it just started to lighten up.
It just charcoaled up because of the hot fire that I be spitting. All right, well, let's see here. I'm going to go Cog Red 2-1.
Okay.
I think SK Gaming's a very talented team. They ended up winning that first matchup, but it was a best of 1. I could see SK taking game 1, but I can't see them taking the next 2.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that game 1's going to go to SK Gaming, but, you know, going into game 2, I think the pick understanding for Cog Red surpasses SK Gaming, and then the result of that and proof of that is Titan. I think that against Titan, SK really showed how limited their knowledge is as far as picks and bans go, and going into game 2, Cog Red is just going to figure out what SK Gaming brought to the table today. They're going to ban it, they're going to counter it, and they're going to bring something new out that SK won't be able to counter. And I think I'm going to see a pretty close game 1. SK Gaming pulls ahead by maybe 3,000-4,000 gold. They close it out, and then game 2 and 3 goes to Cog Red.
Okay, Zimp, your thoughts?
I think SK is gonna win 2-1 probably.
Oh
God.
Oh.
They brought it back. They brought it back. Poor thing.
Just yeah,
Please, he wasn't ready.
Just, you don't have to speak. It's on the screen already. This is, we already know.
Yeah, so SK 2-1, I think, maybe 2-0. As I said, I think Titans just did a kryptonite. I think they're the best team out of these 2. So yeah.
Okay,
We're
all
going
right.
red.
And Allied
I
pours
think
it.
it's a 2-0 Cog Red.
Okay, 2-0
Oh my
Cog
god,
Red.
you guys
2-0
are...
because I think outright just I want to see Baby Devios just outright like demolish everybody, and then we got to interview him, and I want to hear him giggle. about
Okay.
it. So
I do
That's
too.
That's a very like exact thing. So, but you're saying like, oh my God, because like you think like we're North America and like
No,
we're being
no.
biased. No. I understand what you're saying. Okay, I understand. But what I'm trying to tell you is that Cogwreck is going to win. Okay, you
so-
understand this?
Can we actually put a project? Let's give a project to our production team. Let's get an image of Zimpstar wearing the cognitive hat, and then we'll just use that throughout the
Yeah.
match here.
I'm
Just to
okay if we just
remind-
overlay it on
Right.
right on the analyst
Yeah.
area.
Now,
That'd be great.
it's a great match. I'm excited. to
I'm
see it.
really excited, guys. All right, so it's time for the matchup to begin, folks. If you're at home, make sure you tweet and stream, let people know what's going down. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Alienware Analyst Test. We're going to go ahead, toss it over to Kelly, who's going to kick off the first game of the Smite World Championships, powered by Curse Voice.